Jim, are you going to do Q&A afterwards? Yes. If you do, try and get people to go to the microphone, or if they won't go to the mic, at least repeat the question so the live audience can see it. All right? Good afternoon. Welcome to the noon meeting of the Rotary Club of Baton Rouge for our hybrid meeting. Once again, so glad you're all here. Glad you're out there in Facebook and YouTube land. We will have our speaker, Mr. Jim Engster, here in a little bit. We'll first have Nancy Stitch give the invocation, and then we'll do the pledge and the four-way test.
Almighty God, our Heavenly Father, you declare your glory and show forth your handiwork in the heavens and in the earth. Deliver us in our various occupations from the service of self alone, that we may do the work you give us to do in truth and beauty and for the common good. Amen.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Of the things we think, say, and do, is it the truth? Is it fair to all concerned? Will it build goodwill and better friendship? Will it be beneficial to all concerned? Thank you. Okay, so for the first time since we've been coming back, we're actually going to have a new member introduced, even though she's been with us for almost a year now. So Craig Stevens, please come up and introduce our newest member, Karen Zito.
Good morning. Rotarians, I would like you to join me in welcoming our newest Rotarian, Karen Zito. Karen serves as CEO of Home Builders Association of Greater Baton Rouge and has over 20 years experience in association management, business consulting, strategic planning, fundraising, and member engagement. Karen grew up in the metropolis town of Rayne, Louisiana, which is known as the frog capital of the world. Her family moved to Watson, where she graduated high school. She attended LSU, where she's a two-time graduate with a BS in Business Administration and an MBA. Prior to Karen's successful business career, she served 8 years in the Louisiana Army National Guard in the 415th Military Intelligence Battalion, where she received numerous medals and awards. Karen is married to Devin Zito, a local attorney and an IT exec, and is a proud mother of Kaylee, who's 22, Natalie, age 12, and Judah, age 10. Her family worships at Bethany. Karen is well known and respected throughout the business community for her relentless compassion and dedication to helping others achieve their personal and professional goals. Some fun facts about Karen. She is best described as a prissy tomboy, loves to dress up, but loves to get in the trenches. Karen ran a marathon and several half marathons, usually to raise money. And this was most intriguing for me. Karen was a sharpshooter in the military. Beyond the fact that Karen is a successful CEO, beyond the fact that Karen is a decorated sharpshooter, Karen is what I consider a quiet assassin. She strategically chooses her targets and makes impactful changes without looking for any recognition. As a board member of Home Builders of Greater Baton Rouge, I got to see firsthand how Karen rebranded and implemented strategies to make it a viable and recognized organization for years to come. I know Karen will be a good fit for this club because of her genuine compassion and passion for the community. On behalf of co-sponsor Brandon Abaddon, please give a warm welcome to our newest Rotarian, quiet assassin, Karen Zito.
I will remember who to keep on my good side, or on her good side. Your head table today, Fred Dent, Principal, Dent Wealth Advisor, Jim Engster, our speaker, who will be more formally introduced. I'm Haggai Davis, your club president, and Nancy Stitch, the retired district manager, Capital One Bank. We do have a few announcements this week. We're having the quarterly blood drive going on just on the other side of those doors. If you can donate, please do so. Next Wednesday, November 11th, our guest speaker will be Jay Winter. He is the Charles J. Still Professor of History Emeritus at Yale University. He will be speaking to us about After Armistice Day, 1918, the war that didn't end. And he will be speaking to us from Paris. So that'll be fun. If you haven't, this meeting is still going out to YouTube and Facebook. So if you want to go back and see any more of the meeting that you missed or slept through today, you can go do that. Okay, so Fred, if you will introduce our speaker.
Before there was Wikipedia, there was Jim Engster. Jim's encyclopedic memory and recall of names, dates, sports statistics, and political history are nothing short of remarkable. Most of you know him as the host of his radio show, Talk Louisiana, heard here on WRKF. What you may not know about Jim is that when he was a kid, he watched the 1968 National Party conventions from gavel to gavel and even conducted a poll in his grade school class on candidates Nixon, Humphrey, and Wallace. This stuff is in his blood. He's just the man to give us a trenchant view on the pending election outcome. Please welcome Jim Engster.
Thank you, Fred. And it is always an honor. I think this is the 5th time I've had the pleasure of being with you, and this is the best venue to talk in town. It's the greatest audience, the most enlightened audience. And it's the second time, the day after the presidential election, that I've had the pleasure of speaking with you. And 4 years ago, it was an interesting day, and today it is too. And I hope everybody wore their mask in. And speaking of presidential elections, some of us remember Dan Rather when he was doing CBS News, and he had all those witticisms on election night. And he had, I thought, he's 89 years old, but I thought he had a pretty cogent observation of the world today. He said, "Mask not what your country can do for you. Mask is what you can do for your country." So today, by the way, I saw this morning is the 104th anniversary of the birth of Walter Cronkite. And now I'm old enough to remember him, and I suspect a few of you are too. And he retired 40 years ago next February. So things go like a blink, and it happens in politics too. And I'm going to segue from national to local back to national, but 1968, Fred mentioned, I remember that election. Hubert Humphrey was a graduate of LSU. He didn't carry Louisiana, though. George Wallace did. And George Wallace carried 6 southern states. He got some electoral votes, which third-party candidates rarely do, and he received almost 10 million votes. And I remember Humphrey got 31 million, Nixon got 31 million, and Wallace got 10. So collectively, that's 72 million votes. And we had about, I think, 220 million people or thereabouts in the U.S. then. Now we have 330 million, so we're 1.5 times the size. And last night, by the time all the votes are tabulated, last night and preceding the election, when it was about 100 million early votes, we had 150 million people vote. So if anything else, we are better citizens when it comes to voting, because on a percentage basis, more of us are voting than we were in 1968. And think of all the turmoil in the world at that time with Vietnam and the civil rights era, 2 assassinations of major players in the world, Martin Luther King and Bobby Kennedy in 1968, and yet the turnout was not what it is today. So that's a good thing. And I think some are questioning whether 77-year-old Joe Biden and 74-year-old Donald Trump are the best we can provide, but that was basically the choice. And in Louisiana, we chose Donald Trump. He got 58% 4 years ago. He got 58% last night. And Donald Trump, like many other Republicans, is popular in Louisiana, at least with a majority. And he received 48% of the national votes this time, compared to 46 4 years ago. So he did well in Louisiana. He didn't do so well in East Baton Rouge Parish. He got fewer than 44%. I've mentioned here through the years that Baton Rouge has evolved from a red hamlet to a blue dot in a red sea. And last night, Joseph Robinette Biden Jr. received 56% of the votes in East Baton Rouge Parish. And Bill Cassidy in his hometown, now mind you, he won re-election with almost 60% of the vote statewide. He got 46% in his hometown. And when he ran against Mary Landrieu 6 years ago, he received 47% of the votes in his hometown. This parish has voted for Hillary Clinton, for Barack Obama twice, and now for Joe Biden. So when there is a viable Democrat on the ticket, the Democrat is most likely going to win a race against a viable Republican in East Baton Rouge Parish. But statewide, it's a different story. For 9 consecutive elections between 1972 and 2004, Louisiana was one of only a couple of states to vote for the winner every time, from Nixon in 72 to 2004, George Bush's second term. But since then, we were wrong with Obama twice. We were right with Trump, although Trump did not win the overall vote. And this time around, we'll see. And we'll talk about that in a bit. But of course, we did have some local elections of importance. The mayor's election is now in a runoff. Sharon Weston Broome received 48.13% of the votes, and Steve Carter ran a distant second at 20%. And so he is in a runoff with her, and you've got to think he has a fighting shot. But remember, we are a blue parish, and we have not elected a Republican mayor in 20 years, and that was Bobby Simpson, and he was a one-termer. So Sharon Weston Broome has to be considered the overwhelming favorite in the runoff, but the turnout will be different. The election will not be the same as it was last night. And 4 years ago, when her opponent was Bodie White, both Sharon Weston Broome and Bodie White received fewer votes in the runoff than they did in the primary with all those other candidates in the race, John Delgado and Denise Marcel and Smokey Bourgeois and Daryl Gissel. They all got substantial votes. So the overall votes went from 190,000 to 115,000 in the runoff. So we about a 40% decline. So the race will be different. And I know the mayor takes being complacent at her own risk. She will run a viable campaign, a strong campaign. And Steve Carter, of course, is known by a lot of people. He's popular. And he probably will come within 10 points and maybe even get closer. But winning it will be a huge lift for Steve Carter, who is a guy who's from Baton Rouge. And Sharon Weston Broome is a native of Chicago, but she has spent her adult life here. And she's had a stellar career. She was the number 2 person in both the House and the Senate in both chambers, the only person in Louisiana history to do that before she became mayor of our parish. And I know she's been gracious enough to speak to our club, and we appreciate that. But I think that's the way the mayor's race is going. But just to show how conservative the state is compared to East Baton Rouge Parish, the anti-abortion amendment last night got about 2/3 support statewide. It was defeated in East Baton Rouge Parish. And that tells you something. We have a sizable minority population, but we have a lot of college people, intellectuals who tend to be more progressive or liberal, and collectively they make up a majority of the parish. So I think in the future, we're going to see more Democrats running in races like sheriff. You know, Sid Gautreaux ran as a Democrat. He had the whole Democratic machine behind him when he defeated Greg Ferries, and then he promptly became a Republican. There was really no reason for him to do that because Baton Rouge is the blue parish, and it was evolving as such back then. But 1996, when Woody Jenkins ran for the U.S. Senate in his hometown, he carried Baton Rouge against Mary Landrieu. It was close, but he did win here. He would not do so today. He would be defeated soundly. John Bell Edwards got over 2/3 of the votes in East Baton Rouge Parish against both David Vitter and Eddie Risponi, and he was running against Risponi in Risponi's hometown. So we tend to, as a people in this parish, we tend to prefer candidates who are not as conservative as the rest of the state prefers. But there's no doubt that our state is wildly conservative when it comes to not only our national politics, with whom we vote for president. Bill Clinton's the last person to carry Louisiana in a presidential election as a Democrat. And the only Democrat standing in statewide office is Cedric Richmond, the congressman from the New Orleans area and North Baton Rouge, by the way. And of course, we've got the governor, who twice has won, and probably he would admit that twice he's been the beneficiary of having an opponent he could defeat. And the next big races we'll be looking at are the 2022 Senate race with John Kennedy. And it would not be unsurprising if John Bell Edwards got in that race, because it would be a free shot for him. He could run for the Senate. Even if he loses, he's still the governor for another year. And if he wins, he's a U.S. senator for 6 years, and he's term limited, so he can't run for a third consecutive term as governor. So I wouldn't be at all surprised if John Kennedy had a big challenger in John Bell Edwards, but Kennedy would be the favorite because of the way our state votes traditionally in statewide races. And in Louisiana, we haven't had a hotly contested Senate race in a while. And really, Cassidy beating Landrieu was the last one, and he got 56% of the votes. So Edwards would be the kind of candidate who might be able to get closer and might even be able to pull an upset. Generally, candidates like Edwards, if he were to run, benefit when the person in power is from the other party. And the great irony is that if Edwards does this, and I know he's got people pushing him to do it, he would be probably better served as far as winning the election if Donald Trump were the president rather than Joe Biden, because he could run against Trump and Kennedy. But if Biden's the president, what's he going to do? Bring him in here to campaign for him? Probably not. I don't think we'll see Kamala Harris, the vice president, in here either. So that's 2022. And then 2023, we're going to have a real love fest for governor. But it would be nice for those of us in the media who rely upon advertising if we had a contested Senate race. Last night in North Carolina, a state that's about twice our size, Tillis, the Republican incumbent, held off Cunningham, the Democratic challenger, and Tillis was expected to lose. It was close, but he won. $300 million was spent on that race, the most expensive race in the history of American politics, independent of the presidential election, for a Senate seat in North Carolina. And the Democrats pumped in about $100 million to defeat Lindsey Graham, and didn't even come close. Lindsey Graham won handsomely in South Carolina, and the Democrats did not gain any real seats in the Senate. There's right now two gains and one loss, so a net of one. They actually lost seats in the House, and it's a theory that I have, and it may be right, may be wrong, but both President Trump and President Clinton were impeached, and both of them in the next election did better as far as their party than anticipated. Democrats gained seats in the House and the Senate in 1998. And usually in the 6th year of a presidential term, the inertia is the other way. But I think the American people didn't like Bill Clinton being impeached, and probably the American people didn't like Donald Trump being impeached, because we still have some reverence for our government despite all its flaws. And now we're possibly going to have a real showdown to see who the president of the United States is. Last night, the president declared victory, and it really was not the time to do it. And as we stand today, 6 states are still floating as to who wins. And Joe Biden has 238 electoral votes that are credited to him by the Associated Press, and they've done a very good job. And Donald Trump has 213. So for Trump to win, he's got to win 4 of those states. And for Biden to win, he's got to win probably 3 of them. And right now, he is ahead in Nevada, he is ahead in Wisconsin, and he is ahead in Michigan. So he's at 238. So Nevada's 6 electoral votes. If he wins there, that's 244. Wisconsin is 10. If he wins there, that's 254. Michigan, 16 electoral votes. If he wins there, that's 270. 270 is what it takes to win the election. So we could end up having a 270 to 268 verdict when it comes to the presidency of the United States. And one of those weird things is that 2 states in our country do not give winner take all to the electoral votes. And one of them is Nebraska. They do it by congressional district. The other is Maine. And last night, Biden did something that Democrats usually don't do. He won a congressional district in Nebraska. So he got 1 electoral vote out of Nebraska. If that were not the case, then we would be looking at a potential 269 to 269 tie, in which the race would go to the U.S. House of Representatives, which is controlled by Democrats, but on a state-by-state basis, Republicans have more states than Democrats do, so quite likely if it went to the House, the president would be Donald Trump. But one thing this will do, if it turns out to be 270 to 268, it will not make Pennsylvania the focal point, and there's already legal challenges to what's going on there based on whether or not the votes, the ballots, the mail-in ballots got to the polling place on time. They've been given a 3-day window, but that is under a challenge. And it's not unusual, by the way, to count ballots after an election is over. We've done it for a generation or more with military people, like soldiers in Afghanistan. If they have a vote that's postmarked before Election Day, it's counted, even though it might arrive in the U.S. a week later. And that's been the case, and this is not anything particularly unusual, but we had a lot more people vote early for obvious reasons, and about 100 million of us did. I voted yesterday and breezed right in, and I think it was because everybody had already voted early. But it's going to be fascinating to see what happens in the next few weeks and how our country handles it and whether there will be violence in the streets. We had Nordstrom board up all 300 of its stores all across the country in anticipation of violence in our country based on the results of the presidential election. But Donald Trump is definitely the candidate of this region, not just Louisiana, but this region. He probably will hold on in Georgia, although that's getting really, really tight. But let's say he wins Georgia. That means he will have two elections in a row carried all 11 Southeastern Conference states. From Florida to Missouri to Texas to Louisiana, go down the list, all of them Trump states. 2 elections in a row. Those states, the 11, have 148 electoral votes. So if he finishes with 268 electoral votes, let's say 270, which is what it takes to win, that means 55% of the electoral votes needed to win the election come out of the Southeastern Conference. And he owns the SEC. And that was on display at the Superdome, January 13th, when he came out on the field, and everybody cheered. He got the biggest roar of the night because even the Clemson people and the LSU people agreed on something that night, and that was their devotion to Donald John Trump. And you know, Coach O, who's a good guy and had the greatest season any coach LSU ever had, he's not a political guy. He didn't register to vote until last year when he was 58 years old. And he registered to vote for his Democratic buddy, John Bel Edwards. Well, he goes to the White House and he buddies up with President Trump. And then he doesn't think anything. He goes on Fox News and all but endorses President Trump and didn't realize that his players might not have the same opinion as all those fans in the Superdome on January 13th. And the players actually walked out on him in a meeting. And maybe that's why LSU is 2-3 in football, is that they definitely don't look like the same team as far as morale this year as they were a year ago. So politics in many ways has tentacles that go far and wide, and maybe it's infiltrated the LSU football team. But they play Alabama a week from Saturday, and if he wins that one, then everything is hunky-dory again. I think LSU would rather go in this year 1-9 and beat Alabama than go 9-1 and lose to Nick Saban. So we'll see what happens. But Louisiana is a state that is fascinating in its politics. We've had some amazing characters through the years. And 2023 shapes up as a race in which we'll have a cast of thousands running. And it'll be a lot of Republicans. And it'll be interesting because the winner may end up being the Republican who gets the Democratic vote, or at least enough of it to form a coalition with conservative Republicans to win the election. And Billy Nungesser is doing his best to be that candidate. I don't know if it'll work, but he didn't go to any of the Trump rallies last year when the president came here 3 times and endorsed Eddie Risponi, and he was suspiciously quiet during this election season. So he's a candidate. Jeff Landry's a candidate. Garrett Graves, I think, has the potential to be a strong candidate. Mike Johnson, the congressman from the Shreveport area who won last night, again, is another one who quite possibly will be on the ballot in 2023, and we might have a surprise or two. There's all this speculation, and it's more than just speculation that Drew Brees might enter politics. Can you imagine him running for governor? I think he would be a strong candidate. Some people have even floated the idea of Shaquille O'Neal. That would be my dream race, the 2023 race, Drew Brees, Republican, against Shaquille O'Neal, Democrat. And you know what? I like them both, but since we have the tallest state capital in the country, I think we need the tallest governor. So advantage Shaquille. But I love covering Louisiana politics. I've said this before. We have 1.4% of the national population, but we generate far more than 1.4% of the national news. And this year we've had, of course, all these hurricanes. But we also have some characters. And John Bel Edwards is kind of a departure from that. He's not like the previous Edwards who was governor. But it's funny, last night when I was looking at the Cassidy race, he got right at 60%. Adrian Perkins, the mayor in Shreveport, got 19%. He ran second. And the third place finisher was a guy who didn't spend a dime other than his qualifying fee. His name is Derek Edwards, a Democrat. I have a feeling that 10% of the people thought he was kin to John Bel Edwards or Edwin Edwards. And we've had people, I do a monthly radio show with the governor, and we've had people call in and say, you know, I really loved your dad. And they're thinking his dad is the former governor, Edwin Washington Edwards, who's now 93 years old. And as we remember, Garrett Graves beat him in 2014. And Garrett Graves will go down as the guy who slayed the dragon. He finally beat Edwin Edwards. You know, Edwards really didn't lose the 87 governor's race to Romer because he got out early. And this time he did go to the post and he lost. But the way that district is drawn is obviously a case of gerrymandering, and it gets back to East Baton Rouge Parish being a Democratic stronghold. If the district included just East Baton Rouge Parish and maybe West Feliciana and West Baton Rouge, it would go to a Democratic candidate for Congress. But instead we have this weird gerrymandering where Cedric Richmond of New Orleans also represents North Baton Rouge. Now go figure that. And that's designed to keep Democrats, African-American voters, out of Garrett Graves' district. And this is no assault on Garrett Graves. It wouldn't have mattered who represented the 6th district, but that keeps that district Republican. And that kind of thing is done by both parties in different parts of the country. And it's not really a good thing. And we have the same antiquated system with the Electoral College. Now, Democrats have won, according to the vote, 7 of the last 8 presidential elections, the one exception being 2004 when Bush won a narrow victory over John Kerry. And if Trump pulls this one out, he won't win the overall vote. He's down by about 3 million, and that's going to go to about 5 million when the California votes are all tabulated. He'll lose by 5 million votes and potentially win the election. And he lost last time, he lost by almost 3 million and won the election. That would mean that even though Democrats have won by the vote, 7 of the last 8, they would really have won only 4 of the last 8. But it's hard to change things when people are immersed in them, and they talk about the founding fathers being right about this and right about that. Well, they weren't right about everything. And today the Electoral College has outworn its welcome. And we get the 538 votes from 100 U.S. senators, 435 House members, and Washington, D.C., which has 3 electoral votes. So that's 538. Well, that means a vote in Wyoming, which has fewer than 600,000 people. The state of Wyoming is smaller than the metro area of Baton Rouge. A vote in Wyoming is worth more than a vote in Louisiana. And a vote in Louisiana is worth more than a vote in California. California has 1 of every 8 people in the United States living in its borders. 1 out of 8, and yet the presidential candidates didn't go there because it's a given that California will go for the Democrat. They didn't go to Chicago because it's a given that Illinois will go for the Democrat. They didn't go to New York City because it's a given that New York will go for the Democrat. They up until recently didn't go into Texas very much, to any of those big cities, because it was a given that Republicans would carry Texas. And they don't come to Louisiana because we're no longer a swing state, and it's a given that the Republican will carry Louisiana. But if we had a different system in which every vote counted the same, they would visit New Orleans. They would visit those other cities, and we would have more of a national campaign. Instead, now we have them basically focusing on just a few states. And when we look at the electoral map, now winning means everything. When you don't win, it doesn't matter. But right now, as we meet right here today, every state in the country has gone exactly the same as it did 4 years ago, with the exception of Arizona. Now, if Biden wins in Michigan and in Wisconsin, that'll be 3 states that flip, but that's 3 out of 50. So we pretty much know going in, if it's a competitive race, who's going to win, depending on party affiliation in a given state. And so those states, including ours, don't get any attention. And it would be, in some ways, easily remedied. One thing to help would be, instead of having the 100 U.S. senators count an additional 100 votes, let's just move them all to 535, 538, counting Washington, D.C., and just divide it up according to the population. And then we would have a more equitable system in which at least we were voting based on our population. And now we don't, because you can add North Dakota, South Dakota, and Wyoming together, all 3 states. They have 2.3 million people, the 3 of them together, and yet they have 6 U.S. senators. California has 40 million people. They have 2 U.S. senators. We have 4.7 million people. We've got 2 U.S. senators. We have double the population of those 3 states combined. We've got 2 U.S. senators. They've got 6. There's something wrong with that, but as long as it pretty much benefits one party to change, we're not going to have a big movement for change. And so we may be stuck with this for a long time, but it's really not the best way to elect a president. I had Ray Strother on the radio, the veteran and legendary political consultant, today, and he said he was asked a question abroad about the American system, and he said, rather than try, he just said, yeah, we go one man, one vote, but we really don't go one man, one vote, or one woman, one vote. Because as I stated, if you live in Wyoming, your vote counts more than it does anywhere in the U.S. And if you live in California, your vote counts less than anywhere in the United States. And Donald Trump would become the first president in United States history to win twice without winning the overall vote. And Joe Biden would become the first candidate since Samuel Tilden in 1876 to get a majority of the vote. He's over 50, and he'll stay over 50 because California's out there. He's probably going to go to 51 to get a majority of the vote and not win the election. So I don't think that's the best system, but there are others who like it the way it is, and it'll probably be the way it is until I take my last breath, but I'll be whining about it until that happens. But if you have any questions, I'd love to hear from you. As I've stated, I learn a lot more from you when you're talking than when I'm talking, so I'm at your service. And if you come to the microphone too, that would be helpful if you have any observations. Murray? I thought I saw you raise your hand. Yes, could you come to, I'm sorry, could you come to the microphone?
It's in the middle of it.
Right here.
There's a button in the middle, a little further down. The green one.
Just wondered if you'd like to speculate on the ambitions or the future for Adrian Perkins.
Well, I suspect he wishes he had not run for this race, and rarely does someone gain something by losing, especially getting 19%. But he has a great resume: Harvard, West Point, and a decorated war veteran, Bronze Star winner in Iraq, I believe. So he's the real deal. He fought in Iraq and Afghanistan. So I like Adrian Perkins. People in Shreveport, they were not all that enthused about him in some cases because he just got elected mayor there, but he's only 34 years old. So I think there's a second act for him. But politics, in many ways, is luck. And you take a guy like John Bell Edwards, who is from Amite, and was not well known, a state lawmaker, and he's running in a field in 2015 that includes 3 well-known Louisiana politicos, and David Vitter and Jay Darden and Scott Angel, and he won because the timing was right. And we'll see. I hope that Adrian Perkins, for his sake, when he runs again, and he probably will, that he will do better. We talked about characters, and I wouldn't conclude him as being a character either. But last night I did look with in our state, Trump got 58, Biden got around 40. The Libertarian Party got Joe Jorgensen got just over 1%, and then right behind her, finishing 4th in Louisiana, the nominee of the birthday party won, Kanye West, received 4,894 votes in the state of Louisiana, 4,894 votes. And there have been elections like Steve Carter lost the Senate race by 4 votes. He would have liked to have had a few of Kanye's votes, but he did very well in the state of Louisiana, considering that he didn't run much of a campaign, but he did have, of course, have some name recognition. Linda?
To what extent do you think the civil unrest, the pro-life movement, and the choice of Kamala Harris affected the outcome of the election?
Well, I don't think it helped Biden. And usually the incumbent is the one who suffers when there is unrest. In '68, Hubert Humphrey was the incumbent vice president, and he lost, and in large part, the great Mike Royko, my favorite editorial columnist of all time, said it was because the Democrats couldn't run their own damn convention. And he lost a very close race to Richard Nixon. But this time, Trump is still considered the outsider. 4 years of being president of the United States, and he is still considered, and I think even by people who don't like him, he's considered the outsider, and he didn't get the blame for what was happening in our streets, and he deftly accused the Democratic mayors, in most cases we are talking about cities run by Democrats, of falling short of protecting their people. And Joe Biden put himself in a box when he said he was going to nominate a woman, which is a good thing. We do need a female. We need more females in Congress and as president, vice president, you name it. And we need more minority females. But Kamala Harris certainly didn't help him in a place like Louisiana. And just from a pragmatic standpoint, he would have won going away if he would have chosen somebody like Joe Manchin, a conservative Democrat from West Virginia, as his running mate. But he didn't want to do that. He wanted to be inclusive. And in truth, Kamala Harris does represent the Democratic Party and its goals and objectives far more than Joe Manchin. And she's just as, if not more, qualified. Manchin was the governor of his state. But there's nothing unqualified about her, but the vicious nature of the campaign against her was unseemly. Trump's son put out a tweet calling her, saying she was a horrendous choice, W-H-O-R-E. The head of the minority outreach for the Louisiana GOP, I'll name his name, Senator Elbert Guillory, he put out a release referring to her as, quote, Chlamydia Harris. And that kind of stuff just has no place in a civilized society. And I can't see how that helped Trump, but that just shows you the kind of attacks that were launched against her for no good reason. It's unfair. And many, of course, believe that if Biden's elected president, he'll be 78 on November 20th, 16 days from now, when Smiley Anders turns 83. Joe Biden will turn 78. I don't think he's senile. I think he's old, though, and he's had a brain aneurysm. And being president is not a low-risk occupation. Sure, he could die in office, and she would be the president. And that's why I think Donald Trump, by the virtue of the fact that he lost close, if he loses, and he could still pull it out, but I'd say right now there's about an 80, 85, maybe 90% chance that Biden will be the president. But Trump's not going anywhere. He is the Republican Party, and I think he runs again in 2024. And he will try to be the next Grover Cleveland, who was president number 22 and 24. Trump would try to be 45 and 47. We've had 45 presidents listed, but we really only had 44 people because Cleveland was president twice, 22 and 24. So look for Donald Trump to try to become the next Grover Cleveland. Yes, sir.
Jim, could you speak to the interest of Wall Street and the big banks' interest in the national election?
Okay. Well, Fred Dent, who is my stock guru, told me the market was up substantially today. And in truth, the Democratic presidents do far better with the stock market than do Republican presidents. I don't know why Biden didn't say this. I mean, the Dow's like right now, like 28,000. It's gone up 40% in Trump's term, 40%, which is good. That's 4 years. Under Obama, it went up 148% in 8 years. Under Bill Clinton, it went up 228% in 8 years. The three best presidents in the history of this country in the stock market are Bill Clinton, Barack Obama, and Franklin Delano Roosevelt. And the worst was George Bush II. It actually went down in his 8 years. So now some of that is timing, but I don't think Republicans, and many, of course, on Wall Street are Republicans, and many in this room, of course, are conservatives who believe that their portfolio may go down the drain with a Biden presidency. I don't think that's going to happen. And in Clinton's case, he not only had this enormous growth in the stock market, he also balanced the budget. We've got to get something under control. There's a thing, it's a good website. If you go National Debt Clock, and it has all kinds of statistics on there. And of course, our debt is now right at 28 trillion. But we have 330 million people in this country, 330 million people. And only 124 million of us pay taxes. And it's not just the so-called freeloaders who are not paying taxes and the retirees and the young people who are too young to work, be in the workforce. It's people like the President of the United States who didn't pay taxes for 10 or 15 years, who find a way not to pay taxes. And if you're a billionaire and you're reaping the harvest of the wonders of this country, you ought to be paying taxes. And the president could say, look, I was a businessman. I was just beating the system. I was doing what everybody else does. Well, he had 4 years to try to change it. And I don't think he did. And we have an enormous deficit. It's going to be over $3 trillion this year, $3 trillion in 1 year. And we cannot sustain this over a long period of time. And that's why Biden, he got the hell beat out of him by saying he was going to raise taxes on people making over $400,000 a year. Well, how in the world are we going to get anywhere close to a balanced budget if we don't have people paying taxes? And right now, 124 million people are paying not only taxes for themselves and what they benefit from our country, they're paying for another 206 million people, like our president, who don't pay taxes. And that's just not right.
Not to stir up any controversy or anything, but I'm curious with the abortion bill that was passed. Has there been any conversation about the wording, the way that was worded? Because I know my kids voted for the first time this year, and that was the conversation in our house, was that it was worded kind of a positive, negative, that like even for me, I had to read it like 7 times to really understand what it was.
The amendments were not worded well, any of them. And if you weren't following them closely and you went in there and you just did it on the fly, you may, and I would be included in that number, not know exactly what I was voting for or against, but that measure was actually passed last year, and it was put on the ballot this year. And I think the real reason, and this is me, I think the real reason why they waited a year to do this was that John Bel Edwards, who's pro-life himself, he never made a vote that's pro-choice, but he did not want that on the ballot when he was running for governor because it would stir up conservatives to get out and vote. And they might vote for the other person because on other issues, he's not as conservative as Eddie Risponi was. But I'm not at all sure what that thing does. It doesn't do a whole lot. Roe v. Wade has to be overturned, and then it says something to the effect that we can't have pro-abortion in our Constitution in any way, shape, or form. At least that's the way I understood it. But first, Roe v. Wade has to be overturned, and we've had 47 years, and it hasn't been overturned. We do have a new Supreme Court, so it might be. And you talk about how that would be a game changer in American politics, because it's always easier to be on the outside trying to change something and using that as an inertia to galvanize votes. And Republicans have been very good at this, and I think in most cases sincere about their opposition to abortion. But 25% of Republicans are not pro-life, they're pro-choice. And if that issue suddenly becomes such that we have abortion banned throughout the United States, then the Democrats will have the issue and will probably use it. I'm sure they will, as just as vehemently and relentlessly as the Republicans have. So, but the measure right now does absolutely nothing, but it did get almost 2/3 support. But as I stated, it was defeated in East Baton Rouge Parish, which says something about our state and our city, and that's where we started. So on that note, I think I'm getting the cue to finish up, but thanks for being here.
Thanks, Jim. Thanks, Jim. Meeting adjourned. Janet, I'll help break it down with you. I'll help you break it all down. Yeah, go a few more. Anytime you're ready, you can kill it.
What about